Star Trek's new quadrants. No Greek letters. Today on Trekland Tuesdays Live with me, Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek. Yes, indeed. It's also the home of Trekland Tuesdays Live and everything Trekland. We come to you from Trekland through the heart of Portal 47 every Tuesday. It's also the home of, and I got to tell you, our Portal 47 6th anniversary. Real quick, you want to get in on this. I'll tell you more later. It's the home of our 6th anniversary open house this year with our special guest, Mike McMahon. Free to come, door prizes, a mini round table, the whole works. Wednesday, November 17th. You want to click over at my website and get the information, get your free seat, and get in for the door prizes. And all of that right now. We're only 2 weeks away from my open house, but we are a week out from the premiere, yes, of Star Trek Prodigy. Now, I know a lot of our global audience can't see it or can't legally see it. So part of this is going to be a little North America centric here and other parts of the world that are getting it. The Nordics, for one. Nobody said the Nordics until 5 weeks ago. But that's a thing. Here's the thing, though. Even if you're not watching Prodigy week to week, you're probably going to see it fairly soon on Nickelodeon, if not other means. But we can still step back and look about what's going on with Prodigy in the big picture. And that's what I want to talk about today. Hey, everybody, if you are new to Tuesdays Live, welcome, welcome. I, of course, want to give a yell and a shout out to all of our Patreons there, right? Thanks, TTL Club. And thanks, Livewires. We'll give you all a shout out here toward the end as well. But I want to jump on this because there's a lot of accolades coming to Prodigy. Not everybody's in love with it, but it's getting pretty good press, pretty good reviews. The preview of Prodigy, the premiere of Prodigy, prompted a huge, it's not even a review in the LA Times. It's been picked up and reprinted a lot of places, reposted, retweeted. A really good analysis of the whole Star Trek universe and phenomenon. It's kind of like a delayed 55th anniversary love letter and explainer about Star Trek. It's like for all of you folks out there who hadn't been keeping up somewhere along the last 55 years, here's what's going on with Star Trek and here's what it's all about. And it's a really nice little historical, little primer for everybody. So if you've got folks that are Star Trek adjacent or Star Trek 7 or 8 degrees removed, it's a great piece. It's in the LA Times. It's been the last few days. Lots of people are linking to it. Okay. What I wanted to talk about today was another piece of journalism that I think really went by the radar. Maybe some of the news sites picked up and talk about it, but I want to get in and wallow in some of the bits that were said. There was a 2-part interview in Hollywood Reporter. This is doable. I'm going to be on the ball here and actually put this in the chat. I know, what a concept. I'm not leaning on anybody else to do it today. So there you go. This was in the Hollywood Reporter. Name of it was How Prodigy Lays the Foundation for the Next Generation of Star Trek. It's a piece by Leslie Goldberg. It was out October 28th, but Halloween, the Prodigy premiere itself, all the hoopla there kind of, I think, obscured this. I didn't see much conversation. Maybe I missed that, but I didn't see much going on because there are some real nuggets in this. Basically, it's a quick recap, but it's a 2-part interview with Alex Kurtzman and with Brian Robbins, who is the newly installed chair, the Paramount Pictures CEO, but coming over from and still retaining his chairs, his seats as president of Nickelodeon and overseeing kids and family content at Paramount Plus. Now, our formerly divorced folks, the Viacom divorce, CBS and Paramount Viacom, yay. Let's hear it for remarriage, okay? Let's hear it for getting back together, you couples. But that's not as easily said as done. There was a lot of reknitting, a lot of turf changing, a lot of shifting media to account for as they knitted the corporation back together. And this is one of the things that's happened. One of the interesting things about Prodigy was that aside from so many aspects of it that myself and others have been screaming about for years, I think everybody has said, how do we get more action figures in the hands of our kids to keep the fan base fresh, right? Because we've done nothing but whine about it being an aging demographic and, we can't populate with baby Trekkies fast enough. And some of us are past the repopulating stage. We have to help that our genetic codes were going down the line to keep the grandkids and great grandkids, etc., popping up watching Kirk and Spock and Picard and Picard and Data, and everybody down the line. I'm not leaving out your favorite crew, but I'm glad to see that if it wasn't gurgitating in people's minds, that at least it's happening now, and it's also happening in the minds of people with the keys to the franchise that can make it happen. To wit, there's the link. So this is Brian Robbins and Alex Kurtzman talking with Leslie Goldberg at the Hollywood Reporter. And here's the thing. So we just had the big New York Comic-Con rollout. Those folks got to see, fans there got to see the premiere of a sneak peek of the Prodigy 2-part premiere. Maybe even 3 hours, maybe even the third episode too. And Brian Robbins made a incognito visit to New York Comic-Con to check out things in general and to check out the Paramount Plus shows, especially the Prodigy days. And he said when he saw the Prodigy 1 hour pilot, 43 minutes, whatever, that it was so cinematic that he wished it had been released in theaters. He says, I can't lie, when I sat there at Comic-Con, I wished it was in a theater. And he's talking about being very excited. But he wanted to see how it played out in the room, and it was with fans, and that it really did play like a movie. So we've all seen the premiere. They're still talking about how the plan changed for it to move to Nickelodeon, which is what got me excited, more eyeballs seeing it. And that's still going to happen. Whether they're going to show, I had read some reports that saying they weren't going to show a season of 10 and a season of 10, that they were going to run the whole 20. Maybe they'll have a short break, and it won't be an hour gap in between the 10 and 10. But it's going to happen. It's going to happen. But what's also happening, they're already talking about a Prodigy or a Prodigy adjacent, that universe, that sub-universe of Star Trek, being a live-action movie, theatrically. And they're looking at other movies in the Star Trek realm, I dare say quickies, because they won't be quickies, that could be there alongside whatever it is that J.J. Abrams is going to put out on the live action side. That's why this article was so fascinating. And there are some little aspects that kind of come along. But yeah, you're sitting there saying, Larry, you talked about 4 quadrants, no Greek letters. What's going on? Are they renaming the Alpha Quadrant? No, that's not what I'm talking about. I knew we get the Canonistas hackles up. I knew it would catch your eye. No, what they're talking about is this article is also full of a lot of nice insider buzzwords, so you can catch up your lingo if you're not, if you're living down the street from 5555. No, they're talking about a 4-quadrant franchise, which is a term I hadn't heard. Maybe I'm behind the times. 4-quadrant franchise. We've all talked for a long time. I have here recently about it's a kids movie, but the adults can be there too. The best of classic Trek was that way. Kids could run around with ship models and toy phasers. Adults could soak up the content. Everybody's happy. Can we get back to that? There are certain hit shows, series, and movies both that appeal to that. Well, apparently that's called a 4-quadrant movie. 4 quadrants being men above 25 age, women above age 25, men below 25, and women below 25. That's just kind of a basic dividing line that they're looking at now for breaking an audience up into basic demos. And as much about movies, really, as about series. So they're talking about Star Trek and Prodigy being a 4-quadrant franchise. And yes, we've been talking about the lower half of that quadrant, right? We've all been living in the gamma and delta, but what about the alpha beta? So Kurtzman is talking about when they went to talk about CBS about this, when he was renewed the first time, about a 5-year plan. We've heard about that and rolling out the series and maybe now bumping up against that and not obviously having too many, but the immediate concern for them, we get more Trek, they have more profit, is to have wall-to-wall year-long Star Trek that doesn't overlap too much, but basically so people aren't subscribing for 3 months, turning it off, and coming back just for the Trek. And if they are going to get caught up in some other show that's not Trek, they've got a lot more, consumers have a lot more chance of doing that if the TV is on all the time. If this channel, if the streamer is on all the time versus just 3 months of the year, right? Okay, that's all the business side of it. For us, it means uninterrupted 23 weeks of Star Trek. Well, it'll be more than that soon. And they knew 5 years ago, 3 years ago, that the kid component was the biggest thing missing. So hallelujah, what I've been saying for 20 years, what a lot of folks have been saying for a long time. Yes, the powers that be, the looming powers that be. But you know what? When you bring a friendship back, a franchise and a friendship, but when you bring a franchise back from scratch, when it's been sitting there rusty for 10, 12 years, it takes a while to get the parts moving and oiled and all that. And even to see what you need, what needs to be replaced, and maybe what you never had in the first place. And I know a lot of folks talk about how the animated series was all about, the original anime, TAS, was all about continuing the adventures. It had to be formatted and shoehorned a little bit, 30 minutes for one thing, into Saturday morning, old school Saturday mornings format. And you hate to say dumbed down for kids, but to think of it that way, but not dumbing down the Star Trek. But knowing that Lower Decks is a completely different animal, completely different critter, just as loving, but obviously different style animation, different style pace, and a target audience. In fact, what got me was, before reading this article, did you notice how Lower Decks they're both animated, Lower Decks and Prodigy. But adults expect to enjoy Lower Decks, and the kids are kind of optional. Whereas with Prodigy, you expect to have the kids, and the adults you would think are optional. But in both cases, the option, kids on Lower Decks, adults on Prodigy, are getting sucked in. And yeah, the supervision on kids at some points. Your mileage may vary with your kids, your family. But for the most part, there's interesting overlap there. And it's going to be especially true on Prodigy and whatever spins out of Prodigy. That's what they're talking about here. They went to talk to the Nickelodeon, and Nickelodeon was in the Viacom CBS, right? So we're technically divorced. 10 years ago or 15 years ago, 20 years ago, it would have all been the same family. But when they went to talk about going to Nickelodeon next door, they talk in this article about having one eye on thinking that at some point down the line, the couple would get back together, right? And that things eventually would go that way. But even before that, they had similar minds. They both said, yes, let's do it. They wanted to do it with the franchise. They wanted to do it with Nickelodeon. And they came to it differently. They came to it in-house even before Kurtzman and the cohorts came over from CBS. So, I mean, on one hand, it's a no-brainer. Let's get the kids involved, yada, yada, yada. So Brian Robbins is saying the core audience of Prodigy is 6 to 11 and their parents, which now they're calling a co-viewing show. Another nice buzzword, right? So that's a co-viewing show. And he made the point, Brian Robbins, there's been more co-viewing going on now than ever before. He's talking about his older sons when they were kids. Everybody had a TV in their room. His younger daughter now does not have a TV in her room. People are hanging out together more, whether that's pandemic driven or that's just the pendulum of life swinging back. But he's talking about finding entertainment, finding series and properties to take advantage of the co-viewing trend. So, and they talk about, still Nickelodeon is linear. Nickelodeon is still on with commercials. It's a schedule. I mean, you can get an app and get streaming favorites, but the workhorse of Nickelodeon is still a channel that's on cable, yada, yada. Linear. Whereas Paramount Plus is not a channel per se. It's all about your lineup of Avatar boxes. You're on demand. They're still talking about Prodigy, like other shows, being on streaming and then going linear. But they're saying they've seen that pattern work with other properties. And that's really what they really like. Also, the fact that one Star Trek begats another, and they are looking forward to spin-off from Prodigy. He made the point and said that their Discovery numbers spiked after Picard aired. And when Picard was finished, Discovery got a Picard bump, which may have been out before, but I hadn't really thought about that. He also draws this thing about the linear versus streaming and doing a movie in theaters at the same time. And I know Paw Patrol is far from Star Trek, but in many ways it may not be. And he's talking about what a splash The Paw Patrol, this is the kids' animated adventure, right? I mean, young ones, 2 and 3 and 4 year olds, 5 year olds maybe. They released their movie on Paramount Plus, and it boosted the series 40%, 50%. So they're looking, that's the kind of the strategy of having a movie on a Prodigy movie at the same time some future season is running. Obviously, there's not a movie in works now. And saying that, yes, that Nickelodeon will still be, for right now with these kind of shows, the second window. The primary window will be streaming on Paramount Plus, then going to Nickelodeon and having the synergy kick back that way. Consumer products, yes, yay, our old line about the action figures. Not only is it a revenue maker for selling the action figures, but action figures in a store is cheap publicity to go back and find it. You're looking, oh, what's this? Oh, this looks cool. What is that, a show? You know, the kid doesn't know, the parent doesn't know. They do now. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Does Prodigy give you the idea to expand into other younger skewing animation? And the interviewer here, Leslie, said, how about a Baby Spock show? I know, we cringe. She's half kidding. I'm cringing all the way, but then thinking, wait a minute, we've seen the glimpses of young Spock, right? In the flashbacks in Discovery, in yesteryear primarily, and even a little bit in the prime aspects of Star Trek 09. What if we followed Spock along for a more nuanced time when he's younger with Amanda and Sarek? And what if we see young Spock with Michael? And what if even weird older stepbrother Sybok wanders into the house every once in a while? That would be a series, but mostly it would be focused on not Baby Spock, not Muppet Babies, but you know what I mean. Kurtzman says, I won't spoil it, but we've talked about it a bunch. If Prodigy is a success and works for everybody, then hopefully there will be lots of conversations about how to build it out because it's just going to make sense for the company. If people find a comfort zone for Prodigy, and I know a lot of people still are not, a lot of people are loving Prodigy. A lot of people have noticed how Star Warsy it started off. And then when you get to the Starfleet ship, how it starts veering and feeling a little more Starfleet, Star Trek comfortable. It's kind of the nature of the beast. I'm all for it looking Star Warsy at the beginning because that's going to suck in those young eyeballs that are used to seeing that. But it's definitely, you can tell by the end, going to have a Star Trek feel, not a dystopian, everybody's out for themselves Star Wars feel. And the people who aren't out for themselves are the heroic lone examples like Mando. So they've already talked about what a Prodigy movie would look like. They are talking with the same team about doing it. And not to make the mistake of calling it, he corrects the interviewer, don't call it a kid's movie, call it a 4-quadrant family movie. Now, whether you're in Star Trek and you're talking about the Alpha, Beta, Delta, Gamma quadrants, or it's the Wizard of Oz and you're talking about the Munchkins and the Winkies and the Quadlings and the fourth one I always forget, the 4 lands of Oz. He's saying, no, make it a 4. Taking the example of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Animated, yes, but completely cinema, completely blew people away as a serious movie that happened to be animated. And most of all, the entire family. He says his whole family went. Older brothers, younger daughter, he and his wife, everybody got it. This is Kurtzman talking. So it's doable. That would be their goal. Then would that movie be theatrical or Paramount Plus debuting? And again, Robin's saying, gosh, I just saw it once already on screen. I want to see the next one in a theater, which would be kind of amazing to see a Star Trek movie, animated movie, this quick and this quick a turnaround in a theater and then feed back to the series. Now, Brian Robbins is running Paramount Pictures overall and still keeping his seat at Nickelodeon in animated programming on Paramount Plus. He's talking about how excited are you? What's the next steps? But what's going to happen with the feature, since that's also what you have, the live action feature? And he's kind of hemming and hawing, and he says, you know what? We're in it. And he doesn't really have anything to say because they're developing it. Okay. What's interesting, though, is to see he's talking about they're looking at this next movie, the live action movie, for the next. They're taking the broad view. They're looking 5 and 10 years down the road and not just looking at movie. Well, we all know how well that's worked, right, over at Disney and Lucas. So they're taking that game, and at Marvel. That's the idea. They are taking a long-term strategy, at least at 10 years. It's not about, Kurtzman says, it's not about the next thing. It's about the strategy for the next decade. But they're talking about all the movies they're making theatrically, Paramount overall. They will make some theatrically. They'll make some for streaming. Probably that will determine budgets and what's epic and what's not so epic, maybe intimate things on stream. But they also know that people are just fickly different. Some people want to see all kinds of movies in a theater. Some people want to see them at home. Some are going to wait for the big one to come home. That whole process. He says probably those windows are quicker turnarounds than they were several years ago. Duh. Here's the big question, though, in the middle of the interview. This is what I wanted to land on that was very interesting. And then I want to see, we'll wrap this up and see what you all are saying pretty quick. But when he's talking about that live action movie, which Brian Robbins also has responsibility over as the new chairman of Paramount, he says he's only been there 7 minutes. The interviewer says, is that live action movie something that would involve Alex? Or is that a J.J. Abrams thing? And Robbins says, well, we don't know enough yet, which we know that. They've got at least 2 scripts in development. The other ones are on the shelf looking dead, but they're still there. He says, we don't know enough yet. We're working on several fronts. And obviously, Alex is the key for the franchise on Paramount Plus, and JJ has been the keeper of the franchise on the film side. We hope that as a company, we do right for what's good for the franchise altogether. Very politician of him to say that. So the interviewer says, are you getting scripts for a live action feature from both camps? And Brian Robbins says, well, there's a lot going on, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Now, this is a reconfirming interview, and it's also got some nuggets like that. Again, this popped out October 28th. So, just Thursday? So a lot of interesting nuggets here. We've paid so little attention to the feature film side, but to think now in a 4-quadrant era, in a co-viewing era, with different windows of timing, that's the way media is looking. This is the way that decision makers, bean counters, and suits are all looking at the landscape. And folks that have a lot of heart into Star Trek, and though people poo-poo it, Alex is the big Trek fan who can talk titles and nerdity from Next Generation with you, almost the level that Bob Orsi did. It's the Supreme Court that I think about has affected those early, the Kelvin movies came out the way they did because of that committee approach and the chairman of the board. So we'll see what's evolving on the movie front. We've paid so little attention to this, but the idea that the focus of TV that we're on right now, and we're about to shift back to debuting Discovery, which they called the flagship of Paramount Plus, which is interesting. And we'll be back around to Strange New Worlds and Picard 2, all of that. But the fact that the big driving force right now to big screen might be Prodigy. And hey, what about a Lower Decks movie? I want to see those kids. I want to see those kids steering on the big screen too. That might just be too perpetually Adult Swim to do that, although there have been Adult Swim features. But the idea that Prodigy is going to lay down this whole kids quadrant, or the co-quadrants there, and that's going to lay down the marker for a feature film to not compete with, but to coexist alongside whatever live action happens, is kind of amazing. And then these little nuggets about being politic about what's going on with the feature film is kind of interesting too. So I don't know if anybody caught that at the time. I was kind of shocked to find it, and maybe I missed, all the gang Trek movie and everybody covered that just fine, and maybe I just missed it. But we will see that. We've been a little head down here, ramping up our social, getting ready for that open house I told you about. So let me know. Let's talk about this. Did I stir anything up here? People are still assessing Prodigy out of the gate. What are you talking about? A movie? We just saw the first episode. I know. These guys and gals have been working with it for 2 years, 3 years. We're just now seeing it, but we're catching up. catching up pretty quickly. So let's stew on that. Let's digest on that. Let's talk about that. But what I do hope you're talking about doing is jumping over, no matter where you are in Trekland, whatever list or show or portals you follow, to jump over to LarryNemecek.com, click on the links to the open house or /open house, jump in, no matter where you come from, get in, be there with us live if you can. I know Europe, it's 3 a.m, 2 a.m. I know. But it'll be out eventually soon enough, but you want to be there live. Ask your questions up front early. Get there for the drawing. This will be our 6th anniversary open house, and it's the first time I've had someone from a current show with us for our big guest of the year that we open to the public, show off how the portal works. Hope you can join us there and be with us too, okay? But yes, the folks who are helping us every month, week to week, expand our streaming base is our Patreons. You all are great for showing up in the chat. I especially am thanking the Patreon folk on our TTL club. So thank you, Diana Hopkins, Robin Wilson, Lawrence Todd, Anne Marie Siegel, Keith Rombach, Justin Porteous, Nathaniel Robinson, and Blaze K. And our live wires too. Yes, Rusty Harrell, Halbert Goodjohnson, Jalen Bullock, Robert McLean, Alan Hoensi, J.R. Poole, and hey, J.C. Shafsky. Thanks, guys and gals. You can be a Patreon too. If you find the card to talk about it. Mine's simple. You can find a lot of folks doing creative things at patreon.com and support them. We're patreon.com/Trekland Live. Thanks everybody who is supporting us every week. Thanks everybody for being here. And thanks all of the Trekophiles, spelled with an F, who are watching us every week or listening every week on the Trek Files podcast over at Roddenberry. The Trek Files on Facebook is where you can catch it with the paperwork. And this week, a new voice that you have not heard before, who had so much to do with the Star Trek that you know and love and the way it came about, maybe even helped get us a Next Generation at all. Don Beck is our guest this week. He's going to be back a few more times. But we start off this week with the selling of Next Generation before you or I or anyone had ever heard a peep about it. It's an amazing story, and we start telling the story this week on the Trek Files. Hope you can jump over there. And yes, Life Support Live every Saturday at 10 a.m. We will be back on Saturday, the last I heard, at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Dr. Ali and Dr. Trek. One of us is a real doctor going boldly through uncertain times. We geek out with the lifers. We have a lot of fun, and also send you home with some tips for daily living at the same time. Life Support Live. And of course, across the socials, where you are right now. And if you're on YouTube, please subscribe. And if you're not on YouTube, please go there and subscribe at Larry Nemecek's Trekland. That's the Instagram and the Facebook, obviously. At Larry Nemecek is the Twitter. Portal47.net. That's where you can go any time of year, but especially go over and check out what's going on with the open house, okay? Well, gang, that's going to wrap me up for today. If you're on YouTube later, you should check us out live sometime and hear what all goes on in the chat. We've got a lot of fun times happening, and also the Parrot Analytics ratings. Otherwise, if you're on YouTube right now, I'll say so long. Stay healthy. This thing ain't over yet. Do what you need to do, okay? Stay woke. There's a lot of stuff still coming at you that has questionable sources. Please check them out. Please check out who it is you're talking to and see if they're a real person. And if they are a real person, maybe consider what they're offering you. It might be something that changes your perspective on something. I guess what I'm saying is, in the best tradition of 55 years, trek well, everybody.